believing his people were the apex predators of the galaxy that illusion was about to be. Shattered Grant leaned forward, fingers interlocked. We first picked up strange signals near the edges of explored space about 80 years ago. At first we thought they were just stellar anomalies, background noise, but then ships started disappearing. Zor's eyes narrowed. Pirates. Grant shook his head. That's what we thought until we found the wrecks. He tapped the console, and the hollow projector flickered to life. Distorted images appeared, twisted metal shattered. Holes, enormous scars along the remains of ships that had been torn apart by something. Some of the damage looked like energy weapon fire, but much of it didn't. Some ships had been peeled open like fruit, others had been ripped apart on a molecular level. Zor's spines flattened. This was not war, this was extermination. Grant nodded. We sent scout teams to investigate. The first few never came back. His expression darkened. The ones that did weren't the same. The images shifted again, this time showing something worse. Footage from the helmets of exploration teams. The camera feeds were shaky, flickering, but the sounds were unmistakable. Screams, gunfire, and then just before the feed cut, an inhuman shriek that sent ice crawling up Zor's spine. What did you find? He asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Grant exhaled. At first we thought it was an old war, some long dead civilization that wiped itself out, but then he hesitated. Then they woke up. The footage changed again, showing a grainy long-distance recording. A human patrol fleet had encountered something moving through the debris field. At first it seemed like just another derelict ship, floating lifelessly in the void until it moved. Zor's claws tightened as he watched. The derelict was enormous, a ship larger than any dread he had ever seen, covered in jagged, shifting plates of some organic metal hybrid. It pulsed like a living thing, and as the human ships approached, the entire structure unfolded. Dozens of appendages extended, some bristling with weaponry, others ending in grotesque, claw-like structures. The footage zoomed in on one of the whole breaches, and Zor felt genuine horror as he saw them. Figures, twisted, elongated forms that used to be something else. Some bore remnants of armor plating from unknown civilizations. Others still had tattered uniforms, trophies of species that had been assimilated. Then the attack began. The recorded and dissolved into chaos. The human fleet opened fire, but the entity moved like nothing Zorth had ever seen. It adapted. Energy beams bent away from its surface. Kinetic rounds dissolved before impact, and when it struck back, the human ships didn't just explode, they withered, their hulls corroding in an instant, their crews screaming as the very air inside their vessels turned against them. The recording cut. Silence filled the room. Zor's voice was horror when he finally spoke. You survived. Grant leaned back barely. He rubbed his temples. That was the first encounter. We lost an entire fleet just trying to escape. He glanced at the Rathan. We call them the Erebus. We don't know if that's their real name. Hell, we don't know if they even have names. Zorth exhaled shakily. And you've been fighting them ever since? Grant nodded. Not just fighting, preparing. His jaw tightened. We don't know how many of them are out there. We don't know if they have a home world or if they just exist, drifting through the void, consuming everything in their path. But we do know one thing. He locked eyes with his Zorth. Their calm coming. Zor sat in stunned silence, his mind reeling from the horrors he had just witnessed. The Erebus, a name that meant nothing, yet carried the weight of something ancient, something unstoppable. He had spent his life believing the Royan Dominion was the pinnacle of galactic power, that they dictated the fate of lesser species. Now he realized how blind they had been and how utterly unprepared. The room remained eerily quiet save for the hum of the indomitable systems. Captain Grant watched him, carefully gauging his reaction. Finally Zorth found his voice. You should have told the Galactic Union. His words were slow, deliberate. They needed to know. Grant let out a dry chuckle. And what would they have done? Captain dismissed us, called us paranoid, told us we were fear-mongering. He leaned forward, his blue eyes cold. Or worse, they would have panicked. Zorth opened his mouth to argue, but Grant was right. The Galactic Union was bloated, slow-moving. Every major decision required centuries of deliberation, endless political maneuvering. If the humans had revealed the Erebus threat too soon, the Union would have either ignored them or thrown fleet to the unknown enemy without understanding what they were fighting. Both outcomes would have led to disaster. Zorth exhaled sharply. So instead you prepared in secret. Grant nodded. We built warships like the Indomitable. We stopped expanding and started fortifying. Every new colony was Another fortress, every outpost, a forward defense station. His expression darkened because we don't know when the Erebus will arrive in full force, only that they will. Zor's claws curled against the table the Rothans prided themselves on. Their military superiority, but against this enemy, against an intelligence that adapted in real time, that absorbed the biology and technology of everything it consumed. They wouldn't last a month, none of them would. A chilling thought crossed his mind. Have the Erebus reach your inner worlds? Yet Grant's silence was answer enough. Zorth felt his blood run cold. How long do you have? Grant exhaled, rubbing his temples. If our projections are right, his voice was quiet. Maybe a decade, maybe less. A decade, 10 years before the sky burned. Zorth straightened his mind, already racing. If he returned to the Dominion with this knowledge, the War Council would listen. They had to. If they didn't, they would be signing their own extinction. But that wouldn't be enough. The Dominion alone could not stop this. The Galactic Union had to be warned. Every species, every fleet, every soldier had to prepare. He met Grant's gaze. You let me leave before, Captain. That was a warning, a show of power. He inhaled deeply. Now I'm asking you to let me leave again, but this time so I can fight. Grant studied him for a long moment. Then slowly he nodded. Then you better move fast, Captain, he said, because time is running out. As the Vurian ship left human space, Zorth sat in his command chair, staring out at the void he had come seeking. Intelligence he had found a nightmare, and now the greatest war in history was about to begin. Not between empires, not between species, but between life and the thing that had come to erase it. Zor's ship tore through the void, heading straight for the heart of the Vurian Dominion. He had no time to waste. Every second spent debating, every moment of hesitation brought the Erebus closer to the inevitable slaughter. He had to make the War Council understand, had to make them believe. But even as the stars streaked past his viewport, doubt gwed at him. Would they listen? Would the Dominion, proud and arrogant, accept that they were no longer the apex predators of the galaxy, that the war they had spent centuries preparing for, the war against humans, was meaningless in the face of the true enemy? He clenched his jaw. It didn't matter if they didn't believe him. He would make them believe, because the alternative was unthinkable. 1 week later, Royan War Council chamber. Zorth stood before the gathered warlords, his claws pressed against the cold metal war table. The chamber was filled with tension, the air thick with skepticism. Grand Warlord Tval sat in silence, golden eyes scanning the intelligence reports that Zorth had presented. The other warlords muttered amongst themselves, uneasy but unconvinced. Finally, Vayer, the most aggressive of the council, snorted. This is madness, he growled. You expect us to believe that humans have been fighting a war in the dark, that some unknown force lurks beyond our borders, ready to consume the galaxy? His spines bristled. Humans lie, Zorth. They deceive. This is a ploy to make us afraid. Zor's patience snapped. He slammed his fist against the war table, baring his fangs. You think I'm afraid of humans? His voice was a snarl. I saw what they saw. I heard the screams. I watched as ships were torn apart like dry leaves, their crews devoured by something we don't even understand. He pointed at the hollow projection still flickering in the center of the chamber. Look at it, look at it. That is not a human deception. That is death itself. Silence fell. Torval leaned forward, his expression unreadable. And you trust the humans? Zorth hesitated. I trust that they want to live, and right now, that is all that matters. Tval sat back, considering. Finally, he let out a slow breath. You have given us much to think about, High Captain. He glanced around the chamber. The council will deliberate. Zorth cut him off. There is no time for deliberation. The chamber went still. Zor's voice lowered. This enemy does not negotiate. It does not scheme. It does not play political games. He met the Grand Warlord's gaze. It consumes, and once it arrives, there will be no second chances. Toril studied him for a long moment, then slowly he stood. I will summon the full might of the Dominion, he declared. His gaze swept across the gathered warlords. And then we will bring this to the Galactic Union. If the humans speak the truth, then we all stand on the precipice of annihilation. His voice hardened. And we will not die in silence. Zorth exhaled, tension finally leaving his body. It wasn't a victory, not yet, but it was a start. 5 years later, high orbit of Royan Prime, the combined armada of the Galactic Union hung in formation, stretching across the void. thousands of. Ships from dozens of species, Radhans, humans, Zori, Telari, each with their own rivalries, their own histories of conflict. And yet for the first time in history, they stood together. The Indomitable rested at the heart of the fleet. Now, one of many such warships, the humans had shared their knowledge, their technology, the Dominion had adapted. Their tactics, the Union had built defenses unlike anything the galaxy had ever seen. But would it be enough? On the bridge of his new command ship, Zorth stood side by side with Captain Grant, staring out at the black abyss beyond their fleet. Grant's voice was calm, but there was no mistaking the edge in his tone. "They're coming," Zorth nodded. "Then we'll meet them." A long silence stretched between them. Then the stars shifted. A ripple of unnatural darkness spread across the void, and suddenly the shadows moved. Ships, things emerged from the nothingness, twisting and pulsing, their forms both organic and mechanical, their hulls adorned with the skeletal remains of past victims. The Erebus had arrived, and the war for the galaxy had begun.